Last year's hurricane season took an enormous toll on the Tampa Bay area. So for the next 2 weeks, Florida This Week and WEDU will be sharing information to help us all feel safer during this hurricane season. You may not have realized that WEDU is a resource for you during storms and other emergencies. We're part of the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network, also called FPREN. To download the app, you can visit wedu.org/weather and select your county. That will give you up-to-date emergency information and weather stories. The FPREN app, also called Florida Storms, puts your safety first. Forecasts can be customized for up to 16 locations, and geo-targeted alerts come straight to your phone from official sources, including advisories from the National Hurricane Center, lightning and strong storm alerts, evacuation zones, routes and open shelters, preseason checklists and risk assessment, as well as storm survival tips and recovery resources. Remember, these are free, life-saving public media resources designed to help you, designed to help our community during emergencies and hurricanes. Meteorologist Dennis Phillips of ABC Action News in Tampa Bay is someone who knows all about severe weather. For decades, he's helped millions of viewers during approaching storms and severe weather. During our visit together in his studio, we talked about lessons learned from the 2024 hurricane season.
Storms are pushing more water than they used to. I mean, the numbers don't lie. They are what they are. But, I remember Ada several years ago, tropical storm, minimal storm. All of a sudden, they were getting a 6-foot surge in areas of Johns Pass where they've never flooded before.
Yeah.
And, we're talking about storm surge. I mean, you can kind of see right here. With our area, we had about an 8-foot surge in many spots. Well, a 3-foot surge usually is something that we can tolerate. But once we start looking at a surge that's higher to nearly 6 feet, which is what we had, or even as high as 8 feet, that's when structures can be devastated. And I think we all know people who had their homes inundated. And last year was a very interesting year in terms of weather because we had all of the above when it comes to the threats from a hurricane. We obviously had the surge with Helene, but you know what, Lissette? That storm was 100 miles offshore.
Yes.
We got that surge and it was 100 miles offshore. And with Milton, there was a ton of flooding with Milton, but it wasn't surge. It was rainwater. And matter of fact, with Milton, it made landfall Siesta Key area.
Yes.
All the water in our area pushed out. So we had a reverse surge. As a matter of fact, we got no surge at all with Milton, but what we got was 2 feet of rain. So there were areas all around the Bay Area that flooded, not from Gulf water being pushed in, but from rainwater. And then, of course, we had the wind with the trop and every place else. And, even with Debbie earlier in the year, Manatee County had 2 feet of rain. So we really did see a little bit of everything in those storms.
What's in the forecast? What are you looking at possible for this year?
When we look at a long-range forecast, I always take it with a grain of salt because there's so many things that come into play. But usually June and July are pretty quiet months for us. Typically August, you start to see things building, and then September and October, as you just said, that happened last year, that's kind of when it peaks. If we have 25 named storms are all in the middle of the ocean, who cares if it doesn't hit anybody, right? But if we have a quiet year where we might only have 4 or 5 storms, but if one of them hits us directly, then it's a busy year. So I think it's kind of a misleading thing on how many storms are going to form. I mean, to answer your question, I think we'll probably end up with 15, 20 named storms, maybe a few less than we had last year for a couple of reasons.
Right.
But the issue is with us is the water in the Gulf and the water in the Caribbean is still really warm. Warmer than normal.
Yes.
So when a storm that develops goes over that warm water, it's going to get stronger.
What would you say were the biggest lessons learned from last year's hurricane season?
I think the expression hide from the wind, run from the water is the absolute most important thing that you'll learn. I'll say it again. All that damage with Helene, that storm was 100 miles offshore. So to me, the lessons are water is really the big issue with hurricanes. We all think about the wind. We all see pictures of the trop and the roof blowing off from the wind, and those are visuals that we get. But overall, the damage from wind with those storms paled in comparison to the damage of the water. So for folks who live inland, a lot of times you stay put. If you're not in a flood zone, you're probably safer to stay put. But if you're on the coast and you're hearing mandatory evacuation, I'd be willing to bet this year there's a lot of folks that maybe will leave, whereas last year they didn't. We live in the Gulf, and we are going to see storms. We are. Now, I will tell you one thing. Most hurricanes that come in from the south, they want to go north, and they'll usually go toward the panhandle. It takes a lot more for a storm to hook into our area for a number of reasons, but it usually doesn't happen. So the point is, direct landfalls in our area are still rare, but what I'm seeing more is it doesn't have to be a direct landfall to still have a big impact on the area, and that usually is water.
That's a life-saving perspective. Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks.